So if my fellow panelists can all turn on their cameras, appreciate that. So I'm Todd Richardson. I'm the General Deputy Assistant Secretary in HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research. And I'm very excited to be moderating this panel with Jeff Lubell, who is Director of Housing and Community Initiatives at Abt Associates, and with Dorivette Nolan, who's Director of Policy, Planning and Housing Mobility at the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority, which is where Cleveland is, for those of you who can't keep up on the county names. Dinsiri, Fikru, and Chanera Pierce from the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, which is that small town in Northeast America. And so I thought I want to set up this conversation a little bit. Mobility and housing choice vouchers have been linked together since the creation of these housing allowances going all the way back to 1970. So, like a Netflix series that has sort of the recap at the beginning before the next episodes begin, I thought I'd do a quick recap of how we got here. So I have also some things I can show you as part of this recap. So this story begins in Kansas City, the metropolitan area of Kansas City, back in 1970 with a model cities program where we tested out the idea of giving people housing allowances to see if they could get into better housing in better neighborhoods. That study, that little experiment in Kansas City is featured here in this report. It's in a publication called the HUD Challenge. So if you go into huduser.gov, go to the July 1972 edition of HUD Challenge, and you can read about this very interesting study, which basically found at that time that providing housing allowances and requiring the units to be of high quality meant that people moved to higher quality housing because that was the requirement, but it didn't desegregate, which was one of the goals. But anyways, that was sort of an early mobility experiment. And then the next big experiment that came out of this was the Experimental Housing Allowance Program. It was authorized in 1970 and ran from 1970 to 1980. And it tested all sorts of different things around how you can provide housing allowances. We flooded a couple of metropolitan areas with housing allowances for low-income homeowners and renters. Really great bit of research, but it basically found the same thing as this little study in Kansas City about mobility. Those studies, by the way, which also are good, are also on huduser.gov. There's a special page to the Experimental Housing Allowance Program. Definitely worth a read there. Reports like this one on there, but there's dozens of reports. If you want to read a great book about it, Housing Choice Vouchers for the Poor, you got to get it from a used bookstore, but by Raymond Strike and Mark Bendick. Great summary of all that research. Now, as an actor in this long-running series, I don't appear in this series until Moving to Opportunity. And Moving to Opportunity, I get the role of government technical expert on research. And so I'm managing the research side of the Moving to Opportunity experiment. And out of that, we find some interesting things. Now, actually, I should step back. I skipped one. Gautreaux in Chicago, the court case in Gautreaux, that led us to realize that we could do mobility, basically, if you're requiring people to move to certain types of neighborhoods. So Gautreaux was saying requiring people to move to neighborhoods that were low minority. MTO was requiring people to move to neighborhoods that were low poverty. So a little change in that. And so in MTO, we tested a lot of different things. Now, the one big thing in MTO is an experiment, different than control, it's a controlled experiment. And one of the things we found is, to require people to move to low poverty compared to just giving a regular voucher had a much lower success rate. Only 47% of the folks offered that wanted these vouchers successfully leased up in a low poverty neighborhood. For the Section 8 group, it was 62%. So we could see that mobility, the requirement to move to low poverty, was a challenge, it was an obstacle. Of course, the research on that was very interesting. We saw big health benefits, and in the long run, we saw these benefits for children that show that as adults, they get better economic benefits. So then the next chapter in this story, by the way, here's all my MTO examples of research. I've got MTO research all over the place in my office. But anyway, the next chapter in the research was this CMTO in Seattle. And so they were testing out different ways to make mobility possible. And that research said was very exciting. It showed you can do it. We can get people into higher opportunity neighborhoods with mobility, which led to the new chapter, the mobility demonstration. So with that, I am going to turn things over to Jeff Lubell, who is going to talk about the current research and the current mobility demonstration to kick this conversation off. Thank you, Jeff.
Great, thank you, Todd. I'm Jeff Lubell. I am the Director of Housing and Community Initiatives at Apt Associates, and I am going to share my screen here, walk you through both a little bit of an overview of the demonstration, and then a brief overview of the research. And just give me 1 second to get this up. So I have two different slide decks. I apologize. It's too hard to combine them, so I'll go as quickly as I can. So this is an overview of the community choice demonstration. I don't know if I'm the first person to announce to the world that this demonstration has a new name, but it does. The Housing Choice Voucher Mobility Demonstration is now the Community Choice Demonstration. I did not pick that name, but I love it. I think it really embodies a lot of what the demonstration is trying to achieve. So there are three main goals of the demonstration. The programmatic goal is to help families with children who are in the voucher program to access communities of opportunity. These are communities that will hopefully help the children and the families to make progress towards economic security and have other benefits, health benefits, et cetera. There are several research objectives that are related to our goals to really try to learn as much as we can. So we really want to understand, so Todd mentioned CMTO in Seattle and King County, and it was really proof of concept, right? With a very rigorous randomized controlled design, they were able to establish that a mobility program could effectively help families with children access areas of opportunity, at least in that context and as those areas were defined. And the big question we're trying to ask is, does this, a similar approach, does it work in other areas, and to what extent and for whom? So there, you'll see there are multiple sites around the country that will be, participating in the demonstration. And hopefully we will learn not just to what extent it works, but something about what kinds of things work to help families with children access and stay in areas of opportunity. So there are 9 sites participating in the demonstration. In Los Angeles is the sole site in the western half of the United States. There are 2 southern sites in New Orleans and Nashville. In the Midwest, we have Minneapolis, Cuyahoga, which is the Cleveland area, and Pittsburgh area. And several of these you'll see are partnerships between 2 different agencies. So in Los Angeles and Minneapolis and Pittsburgh, for example, and in Chester County, which is near Philadelphia, these are all partnerships between city and county housing agencies. So in the East, we have Chester and New York City, represented by HPD and Rochester Housing Authority. So a lot of different contexts, different kinds of housing markets, different kind of backgrounds and experiences of race, which we think might be play an important role here. So just an incredible opportunity to really understand whether and to what extent and in what context mobility really programs really work. There are several different partners participating in the demonstration. This is just a very quick outline. So HUD's Office of Public and Indian Housing is overseeing this from a programmatic standpoint, and HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research is sponsoring and overseeing the research. The demonstration itself will be implemented by public housing agencies, many of whom will choose to partner with organizations to provide mobility services. There's a great technical assistance team, First Pick, that will be supporting PHAs. And then at Apt and our partners, we will be serving as a research evaluator and informed by an expert panel. It's a 6-year demonstration. We are partway through the first year. This is really a planning year and also a year in which there will be a pilot period to really try to test and work out the kinks in this demonstration before it goes live. In subsequent years, there will be, we'll talk a little bit about the different arms of this demonstration, but essentially there will be mobility services provided to families who are randomly selected into a treatment group. Other families will be randomly selected into a control group and will receive the usual care, and we will study whether and to what extent both the comprehensive mobility related services and something called selected mobility related services help families access and stay in opportunity areas. And the difference between those is we're going to start with, just like they did in CMTO, we're going to start with a very broad intervention that includes everything we think is needed to really help families access and stay in areas of opportunity. And then in subsequent years, we'll be testing pared down bundles to really understand, are there less expensive ways to achieve substantially the same effect? So a lot of thought went into the intervention. HUD has just put a ton of time into this in partnership with First Pick and with the PHAs, and the PHAs proposed things, and there's a lot of evidence from research, mobility, and theories of learning. So there's really a lot of thought that I don't have time to go into in a 15-minute presentation, but you just have to trust me that there's a logic model and a lot of thinking that went into this. So the CMRS is the first intervention that will be studied, and I'll get into the research design in just a second, but basically for the first 2 years, families will be randomized only into the CMRS or into a control group. And if you are randomized into the CMRS, that means that you're offered services. There's no requirement that you take up those services, right? So it's we will be looking at the effect of being offered the treatment, not necessarily the effect of getting the treatment. And a big, hopefully as many people as possible will actually use it. But the most rigorous way to study this is really to study the offer of the treatment, not necessarily just the receipt of the treatment. And people who choose to take it up will receive an array of supports. I'll talk a little bit more about each of these pieces, but ranging from pre-move support to search assistance to financial assistance to outreach to incentives to some post-move support. And there will be some opportunity. This is a framework. This is not a prescription that every single family has to have the same services. So there'll be some opportunity to kind of customize this approach. So one of the differences between this program and the CMTO in Seattle and King County is that the overwhelming majority of families who participate in this demonstration will already have a housing voucher at the time that they are offered the services. So CMTO was only for new admissions, what we call in our demonstration waitlist families. There will be a small component of this demonstration that is for waitlist families. Well, it's small, it will be larger than CMTO, but it'll be spread out across 9 sites. But most people will be existing vouchers. They will be contacted up to 6 months before we think they will need, their lease will expire and they will have a need to move. And the idea here is to really have enough time to enroll the families, to explain it, the demonstration, to have the pre-move, the first contact with the family about 4 months, 3 to 4 months before they are hopefully going to need to move and start a new lease. And that will give enough time for them to really fully consider the services, to prepare, to search for housing, and ultimately to lease up. The concern would be if we waited until families request an opportunity to move, that they'll already know where they want to move, or they'll won't have enough time to really fully consider other options. So this is a very kind of proactive approach, and hopefully be effective. And you see, after the lease, there's also some post-move services that will be included. So this is a brief outline of the phases. So phase 1 is enrollment in the study. Phase 2 is this pre-move appointment. It's quite a, it says 1 appointment. It might need to be more than 1. There's a lot here. This is really the opportunity to learn from the client, really, what are their aspirations? What do they really want to achieve? Why did they sign up for this program? What are they looking for? What are their priorities for moving? You don't want to replace their aspirations. You want to build on their aspirations, right? And really try to help them achieve their goals and and really help them understand the benefits of moving to an opportunity area, and kind of think about the barriers they have, and really kind of get them ready for participating in the mobility services and ready to search for housing and opportunity area. The next phase is phase 3, is a family preparation phase. That's going to vary a lot from family to family. There'll be some families that will need to be working with outside referral groups, for example, to improve their credit or address other barriers that they may have before they can move. Other families, just need to learn the basics of, how do you search for housing? How do you budget, and figure out how much you can afford, et cetera? And, what are these different neighborhoods? So there's a lot of sort of individualized work that's happening in phase 3. Phase 4, families search for housing. They get referrals from the program. They get tours of the program. They will learn about the financial assistance that they have available for transportation and for fees, for application fees, and also for security deposits and for something called holding fees. I'll talk a little bit more just briefly about that in a second. Hopefully they find a unit, they find a landlord. The program can kind of help them interface with the landlords, and then ultimately they will lease up. And there are a number of steps the demonstration is taking to kind of make that process less painful for owners, right? So there's a desire to rapidly move through the process of filing a request for tenancy approval, fast inspection, really trying to get that to happen as quickly as possible. And then in the post-move phase, there are some opportunities to work with the clients and support them and find out what they need. So there's a 1-month check-in, and there are several additional check-ins down the road. This is a rough estimate of the costs. Where HUD is estimating that the cost of treatment will be about $4,000 per household in the CMRS and about $2,000 in the SMRS. So idea here again is to reduce the overall cost of SMRS and see if it can be as effective. This is a quick overview of some of the financial assistance that's available. There are really 2 main kinds of assistance. The first is the opportunity to request funding for a security deposit and a holding fee, which is designed to tide owners through the process of going through the lease up process, and gives them the opportunity to get some money in the event that the tenant decides to back out. And then the second is up to $750 in flexible financial assistance for all kinds of things, not for anything. It's not unlimited, but there are a range of kinds of things that are listed here: application fees, transportation stipends, et cetera. So that's that in a nutshell is a demonstration. I'm going to now spend about 7 minutes just walking you through the research into this program. And this is a summary of the research design. So this is I think of this as a once in a generation opportunity. The way Todd tells the story, there's been 3 or 4 bites of the apple in a generation, but a lot of this stuff happened a long time ago, right? And MTO I thought of as a once in a generation opportunity. This is a new one, right? Which is, it's a big demonstration. There may be up to 17,000 households involved in 9 sites. It's a real opportunity to understand whether and under what circumstances mobility services really work. So again, we have proof of concept from one place. There's obviously been a lot of great experience outside of Seattle and King County trying this in different places, but there hasn't been this level of rigorous evaluation. So this is an opportunity to understand how effective are these services in different contexts. What are the factors that most impact the success of the program on families' ability to access opportunity areas? And some of those, particularly household level factors, individual factors, we can study very rigorously and quantitatively. Other of these might need to be qualitative observations. But it's really important, I think, to understand context. I would assume that context matters a lot, and we'll find out in this demonstration. We'll learn more about the costs of providing mobility-related services in different locations. We hope from a qualitative standpoint, we will get a sense of the kinds of services that are most impactful, and then use the SMRS intervention to really test those hypotheses. And then over the very long term, not in the first 5 years, but there will be studies of what difference does this make in families' lives? What are the long-term effects on children and families? So we have a mix of methods here, qualitative and quantitative methods. We have these 3 studies that I'll tell you a little bit about in just a second. I'm going to try to go through this really quickly because I know we want to get to the rest of the panel. So if I go too fast, please put questions in the Q&A or let me know if you need me to slow down. But this is just a really quick sense of the team. It's not just app. We are partnering with Urban Institute and MEF Associates, Sage Computing, SBR, a series of technical advisors and the expert panel, as well as, of course, HUD. So here's the main design. There are what we think of as 2 phases of enrollment. The first 2 years, families will be randomly assigned to either get offered comprehensive mobility-related services or get offered no special mobility-related services, so they'll serve as controls. In the next 3 years, in phase 2, there will be what we call 3-way random assignments. So one group will get offered comprehensive mobility-related services. The second will get offered these selected mobility-related services. Those have not been selected yet. I want to be really clear. We don't know at this point what those are. If the enrollment targets are met, we actually have the power to test several of these bundles. So that'll be really interesting. And then, of course, there will also be a control group in phase 2, just like there is in phase 1. So in the impact study, these are the main questions. The first 2 are 1 and 2 are what we call confirmatory research questions. So the basic point here is there are a lot of ideas and a lot of questions that you could be asking. And because there's sort of a possibility that one of those might just happen to come out the way you want it to or the way you're hoping to as a matter of chance, it's really important to kind of pre-specify ahead of time. What are the most important questions? So that, these are the ones that we're going to focus on in the executive summary of those reports. I saw that the reports Todd held up, every generation had nicer covers. So I think we have like a very high bar to pass for the next generation of the covers getting more sophisticated. But anyway, you hold up those covers in the executive summary, there'll be answers to these 2 questions. Number 1, for voucher families with children, what is the effect of being offered CMRS on moves to an opportunity area during the first 12 months after random assignment? So that's like number 1 question. And the second big question is, how long do they stay there? So in the first study of this, we will look at 24-month window because that's the duration that we'll have enough families to analyze. I would expect that as this demonstration continues and you look back at the full 5-year enrollment period, that we can take a longer timeline and move from 24 to 48 or 60 months or something like that. And we'll be looking at this separately for existing voucher families and waitlist families, which are new admissions. We'll be looking at variation by site and by household characteristics and by kind of neighborhood that families left. But these are the 2 most important questions. There are a bunch of other questions that also have a lot of policy relevance. We're just not pre-specifying them as the confirmatory questions. So what impact does being offered CMRS have on the kinds of units that people access, the kinds of tracks that people access, in addition to just opportunity areas, right? In terms of the school quality, in terms of the race and ethnicity of that track, et cetera. What impact does this have on search times? It's possible that being offered CMRS could have a positive impact, but also possibly could have a negative impact. Could lead to longer search times. It could lead to lower success rates or higher success rates. I mean, there are ways of framing hypotheses in either way. And by success rates here, we don't mean mobility, or we're referring here to just being able to use the voucher at all. So sometimes that's called a lease-up rate. Sometimes HUD calls it the voucher success rate. And we'll be looking at sort of what effect does it have on the share of existing voucher holders who move at all. So you might, again, think this might encourage people to move, but it also could discourage them to move. And a lot of big open questions we don't know yet. So we'll also be looking, as I mentioned, at some of the site and household level factors that may affect the success of CMRS in facilitating moves to opportunity areas. And then we'll be asking a lot of these same questions for the SMRS, for the selected mobility related services, including a direct comparison of the effects of being offered the CMRS and being offered one of the packages of the SMRS, which is the selected mobility related services. So I think I have just 3 more slides here, or 4 more. So really quickly.
Jeff, we're going to give you the hook pretty soon. Go fast. Go fast.
Okay, I'll go really fast. We're looking at lots of outcomes. These are the bunch of the outcomes we're looking at in addition to the ones that I mentioned. This is the kind of analysis we're going to produce. This is from CMTO. They found that 53% of people in the treatment group leased up an opportunity area compared to 15% in the control. We will be looking at a lot of subgroups. You can imagine there are a lot of different hypotheses about what might make a difference. And then eventually we'll be looking at, or HUD will be looking at the effect on long-term outcomes, including health and economic outcomes for children and adults. There'll also be a qualitative study. I don't want to give it short shrift, but I'm about to get the hook. I will just say that this is, I would say, in my view, it's equally important to the quantitative thing. I mean, really, really important to understand not just sort of what is the numerics, but what actually happened, right? And really going in and talking with the PHAs and the families and the landlords and the mobility staff will really have a better understanding of what really happened, what made a difference, what didn't make a difference, what were the problems, and how can we solve them? And the final set of questions will have to do with cost. How much does it cost to administer this demonstration? And we will deliver some reports. And that's it. Back to you, Todd.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'm going to turn, actually getting to sort of Jeff's point about the qualitative and the quantitative, right? There's no story without a statistic, no statistic without a story. We need to know your stories. And we're early. This is early in our demonstration here. So we want to know how this first episode is going in this season for the mobility. So I think so I want to start with Dorivette because you're in Cleveland County, and that's a lot different than Seattle, where we ran CMTO. So I think my question is what are some of the challenges that you are expecting that are sort of going to be sort of different than Seattle in terms of sort of your challenges on setting up this demonstration that Jeff is so well described?
Well, and thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I think what we're seeing kind of as the biggest challenges that we'll face here in Cuyahoga County is a little bit of the landlord outreach. For the most part, we don't really have vouchers in these high opportunity areas. Our folks have not been able to lease up in these areas historically, which is why kind of we're here, right? We wanted to be a part of this demonstration because we've recognized that our vouchers, the users, even though we're a county-wide agency, we have some 50 different counties, cities, different school districts. Our voucher participants are mostly segregated within the city of Cleveland and in low opportunity, high poverty areas. So I think having landlords see it as a resource for their suburban rental home, not just a Cleveland thing, might be one of our biggest challenges. The second would be family hesitancy. If you don't know anyone who has ever moved out to one of these areas, a suburb can feel like it's really, really far from everything. You know, having to drive to the grocery store rather than walk around the corner or 2 blocks down to get to it might seem like a really big challenge for the household itself. Those are the kind of things we've been thinking about.
So the issue about landlord outreach and family hesitancy has sort of carried through a lot of the programs over the years. It's definitely carried through. And you're in a market that most of us think of as being a little bit of a softer market than, say, New York City. Right. But in New York City, I'd be interested in how you think about the market conditions in New York City. So this, I guess, I don't know, Dinsiri or Chanera, I'll let you guys decide who's going to answer this question about New York City's market. What do you think about New York City's special challenges in terms of the market you're working in to try to make the program successful?
So thanks. Hi, Todd, and thank you all for having us. But by nature of our market, like you said, we have some more unique challenges that we are trying to anticipate for the demonstration expansion. We also anticipate, that there will be some shared challenges that most PHAs and other organizations will experience, like no matter what size housing market that they're in. But New York City is unique in that there are a significant number of higher opportunity areas within the city. So we're not necessarily focused on moving people outside of the city. We're most so focused on supporting people expand their choices and navigating, the housing market within the city. So these areas are largely extremely competitive and time and resource intensive as well. So based on the experience of the participants to date, it is significantly more so resource and time intensive for people, who are Black or Hispanic, or who have a rental subsidy, or who have lower income, or who have children, and even lower credit scores. And so some of the things that, have been coming up repeatedly for us is housing discrimination is and will remain a pervasive challenge for many of our participants. We hosted a housing search support workshop a while ago, and a resounding amount of the feedback from our participants was regarding the housing discrimination that they experienced during their housing search. And it's really heartbreaking given that, the city and the state has source of income and varying other, protective discrimination protections. And that the people that it's most, that it's meant to protect are still experiencing that harm. And so some of the things that come out of that for us is for us to strengthen our relationship with the city's fair housing enforcement agencies, and also better educate our families in navigating the housing discrimination resources that are currently available. But this is also confirmed to us through the participants of that workshop, is that some of the most critical support that they receive is having someone on the staff to talk about with these challenges, someone who knows their story, someone who understands them, and someone who can help them, again, just listen to them, provide that emotional support, and then help them develop a plan of action to address those things. And just being that encouragement that they need to continue on through a very difficult process for them. And then another thing that's probably more unique to New York City is that brokers just are such an important factor in navigating the housing market and connecting our participants to units in the exception payment standards zip codes. New York, in order to find a unit, whether you are, no matter where you're living, a real estate broker is they remain, just one of the key aspects in connecting you to units that you would probably never see listed anywhere else. And one of the things that we saw within our pilot over the last couple of years is that more than about 75% of our moves were initiated by a real estate broker. So we see brokers as a valuable resource for our participants in New York City, and broker recruitment and engagement will be something that we will need to continually invest time and resources into. And it's something that we're hoping to continue incorporating into our demonstration.
So I remember that from MTO in the 1990s, when we were in New York City, it was brokers that were key to units, which was sort of a unique thing about New York City then.
Yeah.
And still now.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is on that front is there sort of like, it sounds like you're already thinking about what kinds of policy changes you might be pursuing as a result of this. Have you been giving some thought to that? I don't know if Dinsiri wants to jump in on sort of like what policy changes you're pondering as you start to move forward with your program.
Again, thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. Yes, I think that some of our quick takeaways for us, we joined this community in 2018. We presented at that time because we were contemplating a pilot and we're babies in this field trying to figure out what works. And so one of the things we did was introduce exception payment standards. And so, for example, in New York City, exception payment standards are available to all Section 8 voucher holders with an HPD voucher. So this has been an adjustment so that we can make those neighborhoods accessible. And so in terms of building mobility features into mobility counseling features into our policies, that's one we've already adopted. Other things that we're thinking about or have implemented has been kind of figuring out what is additional support we can offer to the most vulnerable. So special purpose voucher holders at HPD are offered some financial incentives, some financial supports, including for brokers' fees and security deposits, so that they have as much support, not just to access higher opportunity neighborhoods, but to just be able to use their vouchers. And so we're looking, these are the adjustments that we're making. More broadly, we're really excited at the concept of housing search support funding built into programming. So the emergency housing voucher program, for example, that it's got service fees dedicated for housing search support is something that's really critical to build into this work, and something that, you know, beyond what PHAs can do, we're hoping could be built into long-term thinking about what it means to have support for voucher holders, because it is especially hard to access higher opportunity areas, but it is just using the voucher anywhere at all. It could be critical in, you know, competitive markets like ours.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Actually, I wonder, Dorivette, what do you think about, I noticed you nodding on the question about the housing search support funding. How are you thinking about using those funds?
Well, we're also finding that although we have a softer market than a place like New York City would, our voucher holders are still having a really hard time locating a landlord who's willing to engage with them. So we've, as part of the policy changes that we've made, we've actually extended our search time, maxed it out to 180 days to allow folks to really look for a unit and not have that stress of the voucher expiring on them. We've also set some exception payment standards based on the small area fair market rents, where it was higher than the county-wide fair market rent, to make our families more competitive in those markets. We've also, we hired a landlord outreach and mobility coordinator. We created a position to specifically engage with landlords on a one-on-one basis, someone that was there for them so that they perceive it as being able to more readily engage with the program. And this was all just to support our families, because we've noticed a little bit of a change in Cuyahoga County in the last, I'd say, like 4 years. It used to be that the voucher was a golden ticket and you got it, you got housing. Voucher equaled housing. We're finding that now voucher participants, our success rates are going down. Voucher participants are having a lot harder time actually utilizing their voucher within our county. And housing search assistance, I'm hoping, is really going to provide that needed connection to landlords that are maybe just on the fence. We had a couple right before COVID. We had a few landlord workshops to engage landlords and just have a sit down. We had coffee and donuts, just to ask folks what their perception was of the program and how things were going, what we could do differently. And there were a lot of misconceptions, as you could imagine, rumors, things about the voucher program that just weren't true. So, we're working on changing this perception and also helping our voucher holders really utilize the subsidy that they've been afforded.
So when I listen to all of you here, I hear like the best practices of trying to help folks find units. And I think that's fantastic. Thinking about that, so how has the technical assistance been as you're starting to set up the mobility, your demonstrations? How are you feeling about that? I guess I'll go to Chanera with this one. How are you feeling about your technical assistance you're getting from us?
Yeah. Don't
worry, I won't tell anyone.
No, it's our secret, right? Adjusting and preparing for the mobility demonstration has been a welcome challenge for us. And, of course, we launched our pilot back in 2018. So we had some flexibility in developing all aspects of the program according to our immediate needs, particularly for the owners, brokers, and participants. But, of course, the demonstration requires us to adopt a standard of practice across multiple sites. So that requires us to meet, regularly with First Pick and navigate that experience. So I think how has it been? It's been a very well managed and collaborative process, and it's been something we're really grateful that you all have been very thoughtful in allowing us to remain responsive to the local nuances while as you all attempt to standardize across the country. So we think there are going to be, of course, some things that are pretty unique to us compared to other markets, but so far it's been a really good balance of structured proposals with opportunities to provide feedback and adjust the interventions in a way that feels authentic.
Okay, so now I'm going to go look at the Q&As that have been coming in.
Okay.
Jeff asked a question. Jeff didn't know I was going to ask him to do this, but I'll let Jeff ask a question while I go read the Q's and A's because I have a hard time doing two things at once.
Sure. I've been furiously answering questions, so you'll see a bunch of answers there. You can correct me if I spoke out of school. Yeah, I guess I'm really interested in like what are you most worried about? And how do you, how can we and First Pick and HUD kind of address any concerns that you may have?
Well, I think I would say that you have HUD, First Pick, APT, you have all made us, at least at Cuyahoga County, feel comfortable that this is really an intentional approach that we're taking to developing this demonstration program. And sure, there are the components that are for the research and the evaluation that you want to do of the program, but you're still our weekly meetings, sometimes more often than that meetings, both in a group and then just site by site specific, shows me that you are really working hard to make sure that you, like Chanera said, build in all of those local flavors to ensure that we're really successful in what we're trying to do. So I have some anxieties about the level of work and being able to like pivot to what we need to do and keep track of all of the information and be good partners in the demonstration. But as far as the demonstration itself and how it's being put together, I have no worries about that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so this is a question for New York City. Where do the broker fees come from? Actually, my curiosity is how much are broker fees? That's sort of something I don't know. I don't operate in the New York City markets. I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? How much it cost?
Right. So Dinsiri, I think the broker's fees were coming from admin reserves that we had left over the years. So far we've been paying out of just admin fee reserves over that have accumulated over the years, and we were able to tap into that to actually fund the initial pilot and the initial mobility counseling pilot. But how much are they? I think the average broker fee throughout the city of New York ranges anywhere between 10 to 15% of the annual rent. And so, yeah, it can get, I think for some of our participants, it's been relatively, not as expensive as I would have thought they were, but it depends, of course, on the zip code and where they end up moving, and of course the cost of rent. So again, 15% is the annual rent of what we provide for our brokers' fees, and that they actually have to show due diligence in actually facilitating the lease up, and they have to, of course, be a registered broker with the state and in good standing. We run all of that background information, and of course, they help from the leasing or the RAFTA, the landlord package, all the way down to, helping to coordinate with receiving the keys for the participants. So they do a lot of lead work, but it's been a very valuable part of our experience. And so it's something that we're definitely going to continue to try to support in any way that we can.
Terrific. That's very new information for me. And I've been doing it a long time, so I always like to have new information. Thank you. So, hey, Dorivette, I was thinking about your landlord listening sessions. How are you recruiting landlords for those landlord listening sessions in the neighborhoods that you haven't previously had very many landlords?
Right, those listening sessions were pre-pandemic. So we just sent out like a what we call like an email blast, and it was to current and previously participating landlords, and we just asked them to register, and they were small. It was like 15 landlords each one. But you're right, engaging landlords in areas where we're not normally involved is going to be part of this challenge. I think we're working with a fair housing working group that has formed in Cuyahoga County with the help of our partners at Enterprise. And in that group, we have different, since it's a county-wide group focused on fair housing efforts in Cuyahoga County, they're really focused on getting source of income legislation passed here county-wide. But that group is encompassed of different community development corporations and cities throughout the county. So that's going to be our first foot in the door in these high opportunity areas, that they also participate in this working group. So we know that they have fair housing as a lens to their community development and engagement because they participate in this group. So we'll start there and branch out.
All right, and Dinsiri, how are you getting landlords in areas you typically don't have voucher holders? Or thinking about landlords anyway?
I think we all are. I just wanted to add on that our pilot was really small. And we have an expanded pilot that's broadening a little bit. But our outreach has involved our existing portfolio, but also going out to different real estate agencies and neighborhoods and sharing information. And when we've put out a call to those who've not been part of our portfolio, the attendance has not been as significant. And it's part of the reason why we rely on brokers. Brokers have a built-in incentive to reach wider and connect with units and landlords in a way that we're not able to, or have the breadth to be able to do. So we've relied much more on brokers making that connection for us.
So one other thing that's unique about this demonstration is about focusing on post-move and supporting people after they've made the move and keeping them in neighborhoods that are more opportunity neighborhoods. So this will be sort of a toss-up. We're running out of time here. So if anyone wants, is very excited about this question, have you been thinking about sort of what the post-move supports might look like? Or how you think you'll be doing the post-move supports within whatever we work out with Jeff's team?
I don't know. I think the HUD folks and researchers should probably talk about aftercare. I can speak from the pilot perspective. We've tried to make sure that our participants are connected to the Family Self-Sufficiency Program for long-term employment-related connection. And we offer periodic, at 10 days, at 30 days, at 3 months, at 6 months, at least a check-in. My understanding is that under the demonstration, we will be open for people to call for assistance. But there isn't, I think, built-in aftercare support in the demonstration as I understand it.
No, I was just going to say, I'll wait for our team at Apt and First Pick to tell us how to do it, what we're doing.
No problem. I know we're very early in this this episode of this demonstration, so very exciting. So I want to thank everybody for participating in this panel today. I think we're sort of wrapping things up here. I think at 1:15, I'm gonna make sure I have that right. I think we're supposed to wrap up here at 1:15. So anybody want to have final words? We've got 1 minute.
I don't want to hold it at all, but I just really wanted to add on to what Dorivette said. It's very exciting to build on the knowledge base that's been built through the work of advocates, HUD, researchers, and I think from PHAs to join in this as well. So that part of it is really exciting. And with Allison, Janie, with everybody who's involved in the demonstration, it's folks who've done the work over years who are shaping what happens next. We feel it, we thank you, and we're grateful for this opportunity. I think that's what I would add. Thank you.
Well said.
I couldn't have asked for a better closing statement on this panel. Very much. All right, I will turn this back over to the people who control the videos and everything else for the next panel.